Welcome back. Let's continue building our RESTful service with ReactPHP. And in this video, I want to start adding authentication so that we can ensure that certain resources on our server are only available to users who are logged in. So, how we can implement this in a RESTful service? Because it's different to the normal authentication you use in the browser. Okay, let's start, and first of all, we need users. So we create a migration for users table. Run doctrine migrations generate. Here is our new migration. We don't need a description. In app method, we create a new table users and then fields. An ID, email, which is a not nullable string, password of course, which also will be a string. For now it is enough. Let's keep it simple and focus on the authentication part. We can revisit it later to add connections to orders, for example. But these two fields need to be there. They are required when we create a new user. Add a primary key for column ID and a unique index for email. Then call this add_SQL with our query. In method down we drop table users. Okay, the migration is done. Let's apply it. Run doctrine migrations, migrate. Refresh the tables, and here it is, our table for storing users. So this is how a user should look like. Then we need routes for a user. For now, I want two routes, sign up and sign in. What about logout? Since our server is stateless and we don't store information about the user on the server, we can't log the user out. There is nothing to delete. There is no session to clear. So we don't need a logout route. Let's create our first route. It will be a post route to create a new user. auth/signup and the controller signup controller. We create a separate namespace for authentication controllers. Let's name it authentication. Inside create signup controller. In method invoke, which accepts a server request, we are going to perform several actions. First of all, we will validate the request. We need an email and a password here. Then we will check that there is no user with the provided email, and only then we will create a new user. So let's start. We need a storage to save users in the database. Let's create it. In the constructor, we inject a connection to the database. Add method create. It accepts email and password and returns a promise. Inside we make an insert query. Insert into table users. We have email and password, and provide the values. So this method returns a promise that resolves once the user is created. Now move back to the controller. Add the constructor and inject a storage. Now let's handle the request. We extract email and password from the request. We can't use raw password as it is. Instead, before we persist it in the database, we need to hash it first. We use a native PHP function password hash and bcrypt algorithm. Then call this storage create and provide an email from the request and a hashed password. Once the user is created, we return an empty 201 response. Add an error handler. If something failed, we return internal server error. Okay, the first draft is done. Let's build our dependencies and try to sign up a new user. Open server.php and create a new storage. At first we import it with an alias users. Instantiate the storage and pass it here into the controller. Import the controller class. Save and let's see how it works. Open request file and add a new request. Create a new user. It will be a post request to localhost port 8000 auth/signup. Add content type header. We will send a JSON request. Then the body of the request, email and a password. OK, send the request. We get back 201 response, and if I open the database, here is our new user. But of course we are missing a validation here. If I try to send the same request, we get back 500 error saying something about the database row. So let's make it more friendly by adding validation. Add a new class input. It is a wrapper on top of our request, thus injected in the constructor. Then comes method validate. Inside we create two validators, for email and for password. In the request body we want to see a field named email. It should not be blank, a string and a valid email. Add a name for this validator. And almost the same validator can be used for password. Copy this, paste, remove email and fix the variable and the name. Now we make a new composite validator of these two and validate the request. And let's add helper methods for a hashed password and email. The first method returns a hashed password from the request. Copy the logic from the controller and replace variable with the return statement. Then method email. Again, copy and paste the code from the controller and add a return statement. Done. Then in the controller we instantiate the input and validate it. Remove this and instead use input helper methods for email and for a hashed password. So the validation is done. Now we need to check if a user with a provided email already exists. Open our storage and let's fix method create. Create a new private method, name it explicitly email is not taken. Provide a string email and return a promise. Inside we make a select query just to check that this email is already taken. If the result of this query is empty, It means that there is no such user and we resolve the promise. Otherwise, we reject it with user already exists exception. Create it right here and extend from runtime exception. OK, then in method create, before executing an insert query, we check that a provided email is not taken, and only then we perform a query and create a new user in the database. Add return and inject email with password. Move back to the controller and add a handler for our new exception. User already exists. Return a badge request in this case, saying that a provided email is already taken. Save it and let's see if it works. Create a new user with a new email. It works. Now send the same request one more time. And yes, this email is already taken. And try to send a request with some random string, which is not a valid email address. We again receive a badge request. Our sign-up endpoint works well. Now the next step, of course, is to sign users in and create a token.